New York City was not yet the bustling metropolis it would become. Instead, it was a pivotal moment in the early history of what would later become one of the most influential cities in the world. To understand the significance of 1626, we need to delve into the broader context of the era, the players involved, and the long-term impact of the events that unfolded. At the beginning of the 17th century, the area that is now New York City was inhabited by the Lenape people, a part of the larger Algonquin-speaking family. The Lenape had lived in the region for centuries, relying on the rich natural resources of the area, which included the fertile lands and the waterways that were vital for trade and transportation. Europeans had been exploring and establishing colonies in the Americas for several decades by the early 1600s. The Dutch were particularly active in the New World, driven by both the desire for new trading opportunities and the pursuit of territorial claims. In 1609, the English explorer Henry Hudson, sailing under the Dutch flag, navigated the river that now bears his name and laid the groundwork for Dutch interest in the region. Hudson's voyage led to the Dutch claiming the area for their country, which they subsequently named New Netherland. The Dutch West India Company, a powerful trading corporation, was tasked with developing and exploiting this new territory. By the early 1620s, the Dutch had established several small trading posts along the Atlantic coast. The settlement of New Amsterdam was founded on the southern tip of Manhattan Island in 1625. This settlement would later evolve into the city of New York, but in 1626, it was still in its infancy. The event that would become legendary occurred in May 1626. Peter Minuit, who had been appointed as the Director General of New Netherland, is credited with purchasing the island of Manhattan from the Lenape people. The transaction was reportedly made for goods worth 60 guilders. In contemporary terms, this is often equated to around $24, though the actual value of the goods and the nature of the transaction are subjects of historical debate. The purchase is significant for several reasons. Firstly, it marked the beginning of a formal European presence on Manhattan Island. While the Dutch had been in the area for some time, this purchase represented a formal agreement and an assertion of European claim over the land. Secondly, the transaction highlights the complex nature of early colonial interactions. While the Dutch viewed the purchase as a formal and legal acquisition of land, the Lenape understood it within their own cultural context. Land ownership concepts differed significantly between the Europeans and the indigenous people, leading to misunderstandings and conflicts in the years that followed. At the time of the purchase, New Amsterdam was a small settlement. The Dutch were primarily interested in the area as a trading post rather than a large-scale colony. The early settlers were mostly traders, merchants, and a few farmers. The settlement's location was strategically chosen due to its proximity to the Hudson River, which facilitated trade and transportation. New Amsterdam's layout was modest, with a few buildings clustered around a central fort and market area. The early years were marked by a degree of hardship. The settlers faced challenges such as harsh winters, food shortages, and conflicts with the local indigenous peoples. The Dutch were skilled traders and established a thriving fur trade with the Lenape and other indigenous groups. This trade became a crucial part of the colony's economy and helped establish New Amsterdam as an important trading hub. The Lenape, or Delaware Indians, had a complex social structure and a rich cultural heritage. For them, the transaction with the Dutch was not a simple sale of land but rather part of a broader network of alliances and trade relationships. The Lenape were aware of the potential benefits of engaging with the Dutch, such as acquiring European goods and forming strategic alliances. However, The concept of land ownership as understood by Europeans did not directly translate to Lenape customs and practices. In the years following the purchase, relations between the Dutch and the Lenape became increasingly strained. As more Europeans arrived and the settlement expanded, conflicts over land and resources grew. These tensions were compounded by misunderstandings and cultural differences. The events of 1626 had profound and lasting effects on the history of New York City and the broader region. The acquisition of Manhattan was a pivotal moment in the development of what would eventually become one of the most important cities in the world. The Dutch continued to develop New Amsterdam, and by the mid-17th century, it had grown into a bustling port and commercial center. However, the Dutch presence in North America was not to last forever. In 1664, the English seized control of New Amsterdam and renamed it New York, in honor of the Duke of York. The transition from Dutch to English rule marked a new chapter in the city's history, but the foundations laid in 1626 continued to influence its development. New York City grew rapidly under English rule and eventually became a major center for trade, finance, and culture. The impact on the Lenape and other indigenous peoples was more destructive. The arrival of Europeans led to displacement, conflict, and significant changes to their way of life. The legacy of these early interactions continues to be a point of reflection and discussion, particularly in the context of understanding the complex history of colonialism and its impacts on indigenous communities. The year 1626 stands as a crucial milestone in the history of New York City. The purchase of Manhattan Island by Peter Minuit from the Lenape people set the stage for the development of a settlement that would grow into one of the most influential cities in the world. While the transaction itself was emblematic of early colonial expansion, it also highlighted the complexities and challenges of cross-cultural interactions. The effects of these early events are still felt today, as New York City continues to evolve and thrive as a global metropolis.